Hello, welcome back to the Black Eagles podcast, episode 12, and surprise, surprise, if you're a follower and a listener of the podcast, you probably noticed that we only just released our last episode 2 days prior. Well, we're back. As we mentioned towards the end of that episode 11, we tracked down an expert. We found someone who knows everything about Faroese football. And as promised, Kaan has gone out into the field, gotten us an interview so that you guys can be the most informed wing of the Beşiktaş fan base. On my end, I don't have too much to say. There's not a lot of news, nothing on the transfer front, nothing elsewhere for me to kind of update you on. Again, we did just post our previous episode not long ago, so not much has gone on since then. One thing I can say about this particular match, meaning the match against B36 Tórshavn, is that we have a sort of, I don't know how realistic, how factual this is, but, you know, rumored lineups have come out. And the most, the most likely of all the ones I've seen, or at least the best source I've seen one of these from, suggested an interesting lineup. I could be wrong. I may be wrong. First of all, Gökhan Töre and Ozan Özyakup are likely out tomorrow. Ozan picked up a slight injury in our last friendly match. There hasn't been a big announcement about it, so we can assume maybe it's not that serious, but playing against a relatively small side on the international scene, I think the idea is we can probably afford to let him get a bit of a rest in this one. But so, the lineup I've seen has Tolga in the middle, in the goal. Not a big surprise since Fabri's clearly gone, and Urku is still just 20, has never started before, and this is a Europa League match after all. On the back line, we've got Gökhan Gunu on the right side and Adrian on the left side, not Caner Erkin. In the midfield, we've got an interesting selection. So we just, in our last episode, Kaan and I had suggested we were probably going to be playing with two central midfielders and foregoing a defensive midfielder, although, surprise, surprise. Well, I guess since Ozan is injured, we're trying out Durkan Tokuz at defensive mid and Tolga in the middle as a central midfielder. On the wings, we've got Lenz and Babel. And then the biggest surprise, perhaps, in the whole lineup, besides maybe Durkan, is Orkan Çınar playing behind the striker in that maybe attacking midfield role or secondary striker role, I'm not sure. And of course, our starting striker will be Kyle Larin, which for me is pretty good news. I think this is the type of side that you'd want to see him getting some experience against, the type of pressure and energy that the game will require, you know. Hopefully Kyle Larin will match that and up his game a little bit from the somewhat disappointing preseason he experienced with us. But anyway, that's all there really is to report as far as what we know about the squad going into the club, the squad going into the match. Of course, Quaresma has rejoined the team. There are many images of him training now, but of course he's also not been listed for this match. Neither has Pepe or Domagoj Vida. But besides that, you know, get comfortable. Grab yourself a nice drink. You know, take the most comfortable seat in your house. Hunker down for a minute because Kaan will be interviewing. Boy, I don't want to mess up his name. Kaan will be interviewing Tróndur Arge. I'll spell it out for you. It's Trondur, a fascinating name. Really a kind of cool name, honestly. I'm going to probably sound like an American idiot, but I guess that's what I am to some extent. But, you know, sounds very Viking, sounds very cool. gave me flashes of Skyrim. If I'm gonna admit to being even stupider. But yeah, sure enough, it should be a fascinating interview. We're gonna gain some great insight into Faroese football, life on the Faroe Islands, and how excited they are about Beşiktaş coming to town. So, sit back, relax, and enjoy. Presenting Kaan Bayazit interviewing Tróndur Arge. Enjoy.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Black Eagles podcast. I'm joined here live from the Faroe Islands by Tróndur Arge from the Faroe Islands. You live in Tórshavn, I believe?
Yes, I live in Tórshavn now. Yeah, I do.
Okay, I just want to thank you for joining us on the podcast here. It's quite difficult to find information on Faroe football, let alone to find an informed journalist such as yourself for me to speak to. So I'm very happy that I managed to track you down and that you were able to come on the podcast, because of course tomorrow the first of the two legs is already taking place between B36 Tórshavn and Beşiktaş. And the first question I want to ask you, Tróndur, is how is the feeling in Tórshavn right now? Is there like a big match anticipation going on there?
It's bigger than normal, yes, but it's not like the biggest feeling you can get around football in the Faroe Islands is when our national team plays. You can feel it like for a whole week sometimes. But this one, it's a bit sudden because we didn't know that B36 would win their game until a week ago. But since that time, I think people know now that Beşiktaş is coming to Tórshavn, and you know that there's something going to happen in Gundadalur, as we call the stadium area. So yeah, you can feel that something is happening now, and especially if you go on to the medias and so on, because as you say, it might be difficult for you to find information about Faroese football, but for us to find information about Turkish football is not so difficult. So there are a lot of angles that you try to cover, and also these angles such as what does it mean for a Faroese football club to get such a big club like Beşiktaş here, and of course like. How do you tackle that? Because there are a lot of things that we're not used to on a club level, but we're used to it on an international level with the national team.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's been a while, I guess, for any team from the Faroe Islands to play a somewhat bigger club like Beşiktaş, like Fenerbahçe, who you guys played in 2006 as well, and we were talking about this off air as well in 1999. Was it Tórshavn as well who faced Ankaragücü?
Yes, that was in 1999. I don't, because what I do remember is that the B36 they were champions in 97, and then I think they fourth or third the year after. And then, so this has been in the UEFA Cup or something like that, and they played Ankara. I pronounced it Ankaragücü at the time, but I don't remember a lot of that game. I've been pretty young at that time. But later on, the Fenerbahçe games and when Beşiktaş was here in 2010, those games are some of the biggest games that have been here in the Faroe Islands. I'd say. Because we only had international clearance to play in the UEFA Cups in 1991, means that we were really starstruck in the early years, because our national team plays it in its first qualification for the Euro 92, which Denmark ended up winning, and we're in group with Denmark. And it's very famous that we won our first game. Our first ever full international game with the national team. We beat Austria 1-0 with Anthony Polster and Andreas Herzog and other famous players on the team, and we beat them. So everything was geared up. And then we had Glasgow Rangers coming this way with Paul Gascoigne, who was really big at the time. Those might have been the games where we have been the most starstruck. Yeah. Other than that, you have to go back to Fenerbahçe and Beşiktaş and so on. They have been some of the biggest clubs that have been here.
And of course, you mentioned Austria there, and that's quite interesting because yesterday, of course, we learned the potential opponents of either B36 Tórshavn or Beşiktaş in the third qualifying round would be LASK Linz from Austria. or Lillestrøm from Norway, I believe. So
Yeah.
those are the potential opponents for whoever progresses to the next round. Well, I don't want to presume anything, you know. I mean, we saw last season both Fenerbahce and Galatasaray got knocked out by relatively small clubs such as Vardar and Östersunds. So it's definitely not something. I think it's very important not to count yourself to the next round already. That's a mistake that the teams often make, and then you could encounter a surprise.
You could. I would say. I think there are a lot of positives when we talk Faroese football, but when you're talking B36 versus Beşiktaş, it's pretty clear that what we're talking about here is we have this feeling that when we play, especially with the full national team, is that we can get points almost everywhere. But once we meet Portugal, which we lose, I think is it 4-5 or 6-0. It's very difficult
But that
when
was
you get
in Portugal, so that's different, right?
No, we also lost the home game.
Yeah, but
I think
what was the score there?
6-0. It was it was definitely our worst full national game for a lot of years, and that's the same thing that we're talking about here. It's the difference is now really big. So you play on the presumption that you have to probably damage control is going to be a big word, and you're going to try and get positives out of situations in the game. But I think if you look at the odds, if you're looking at the betting sites and so on, it's a pretty clear indication that Beşiktaş might just have. I don't know the numbers, but I would assume that a normal player from Beşiktaş would earn more than Beşiktaş should spend in a year. So it's that kind of difference.
Well, the average wage, I guess, in euros for the starting 11, that's probably going to be around 1.6, 1.7 million euros a year. So I don't know what Tórshavn spent annually.
Yeah, a lot less than that.
Well, you can also look at the market value. Tórshavn's market, estimated market value according to Transfermarkt, which you have to take that stuff with a huge pinch of salt. But the estimated transfer value, I think, is around 450,000 for the entire squad for Tórshavn, I believe. And for Beşiktaş, it's around 79 million. So, of course, you're in that regard, there's a huge difference there. But that's at the end of the day, once the whistle's blown, it's down to the players on the pitch, and it's not down to these numbers and all these things. And I think that's a very important thing in Turkey. I think there's kind of this attitude of, they're already looking towards the next round, but it's very important that you take it game by game, I think. And I think our coach, Şenol Güneş, that's the mindset he'll be going into this game, I hope. Is something else I want to talk about? In Tórshavn right now, or in the country as a whole, because maybe people don't really realize, but the Faroe Islands, the population is around 50,000, so that's even smaller than, for example, Iceland. Iceland, who of course gets touted around the world for their phenomenal performances the last couple of years, with a population of only around 300,000 and what they managed to achieve. But the Faroe Islands even smaller. If you compare that to Turkey, more than 80 million inhabitants, of course. But when you put your ear to the ground, so to speak, and you talked about that there is a certain amount of excitement because of a big club coming to town, are there any players that in particular people are excited about seeing?
I think, you mean from Beşiktaş?
Yes.
I would say around here everybody watches the Premier League. Premier League, it's you're almost born with a badge from the Premier League also. So Premier League is really big. So a player like Ryan Babel, everybody who's followed Premier League knows him from his time in Liverpool, and you would know Negredo from his time at City. So you would those kind of players, and then it would be the World Cup players, but they're of course not playing now because has to be their summer vacation. And Quaresma has been here.
Against Viking.
Yeah, exactly. And with the national team, the national team. So he's played the Faroese oppositions 3 or 4 times now. Pepe, of course, he has this image of the heart man from Real Madrid from that time. So yeah, those are the kind of players. But it's also exciting, I think, that once you sit down, I'm not sure that people around here would know many players from Beşiktaş by name. But once the game starts, they will do the research. It's, I would say, a reasonably knowledgeable crowd, the Faroese. You know, a lot of people will be, I would say, some people might be now, and some people might just in the hours up to the game be on the internet, Googling the scene, who's playing, who's who, and what do they do, and remember them from the Championship Manager or Football Manager or whatever, and so on. Huh? But if you expect people, like if you ask them about the Premier League, they will almost be able to tell you the lineup of, I don't know, of Bournemouth almost. But when it comes to football, when you go to Italy and you go that way, and or even Spain, the lower leagues, it's a bit more difficult. But what I think they will be excited to see is the level of football that Beşiktaş can give as an opposition to Beşiktaş, because if B36, for instance, say that it's 0-0 at halftime or something like that, that's going to be the kick. That's going to be what you're hoping for, or that one chance, because Beşiktaş they play, and we can talk about this later, but they play very exciting football with very young players, and if they are able to create 1 or 2 moments of magic, that's going to be that's going to be the benchmark for what we want to see, because we know that the quality of Beşiktaş is sometimes at a Champions League group stage quality.
Yeah, of course, Beşiktaş had a phenomenal run in the Champions League group stages last season, unbeaten, won the group, all that stuff. But of course, B36, they've already played 4 official Europa League games, qualifiers. Beşiktaş, this is going to be their first official game. It's going to come early in the season. I think it's a good time from B36's perspective to face Beşiktaş, of course. Beşiktaş won't be at the top their peak yet. They won't have peaked yet. I think maybe that's going to be an advantage. I saw the competition right now. There's 15 games played. How many matches are there in the season in the Faroe?
27. Yeah, but there's 10 teams in the best division. Sometimes it may number 9 and 10 get the difficulties to keep up, and sometimes we've even discussed having 12 teams maybe some years ago. So it's a bit different because we lose a lot of the people at their best age. They go to Denmark for education. So very often you'll see teams have a lot of players from 18 till 25. And then you'll see them have players who are 18 to 22 maybe, and then from 25 to 30 there might not be so many players. So that's one of the the elements of that we have in Faroese football. And right now it's summer break, which is crazy when you think about the fact that we have maybe 3 months of good weather, and for a month and almost a month and a half we're on a vacation. Like in Iceland, this is the time when you play the most of your games because the weather is at its best. But what that does is that B36 are able to rest between the games. So when they played St. Joseph's, they were resting until the next game. And after they came to the second round against Titograd, they played only those 2 games. And this time around, they're usually our national holidays, our national day is on 28th and 29th of July, and it's very popular to play your games in Tórshavn because they're going to be like, almost everybody in the Faroe Islands will be in Tórshavn for the big national day. But they have decided to reschedule that match, and it's sort of like a money match because you get so many people going to the game. But they've decided to reschedule it so they get full rest between the games. So that might be an advantage. But what we always talk about here in the Faroe Islands is that very seldom do we play against teams when we're favorites. So very often it's up to the opposition. If Beşiktaş play well, Beşiktaş ain't going to be able to stop them. It's the same if Portugal play well, and it's the same if for instance, we played Switzerland. But they played really well in both games, and we cannot do anything about it. But we met Greece when they were in a bit of a down, so we managed to hit them. But Beşiktaş can only do what they can do. And when they do their part 100%, then it's a bit up to Beşiktaş. If they hit a bump on the road, maybe it can be 1-1 at some point in the game. Maybe, time will go and the Beşiktaş don't feel like they have to win the first game. They'll take a 1-1 or whatever. Huh? So those are the kind of things that may. But if in the moment a team from the Faroe Islands doesn't play to almost their best, you lose. That's what we know. So that's the feeling around it. That is, we have to play 100% and then take all the small advantages, such as resting, being in season, having played a lot of games. Game form should be really good. And they have the experience of playing 4 very close games. None of the 4 games they played now in the Europa League have been either done or dusted before the last minute. So they're full on to do that. So those things might help, but if you go back to 2010, I watched that game and I just watched some of the highlights again now. It's 4-0 after 44 minutes. It's 1-0 after 2 minutes. Those things can also happen, and it's difficult to stop them once you're playing against players who, are at a different level.
Yeah, I actually watched the highlights. That's coincidental. I actually watched those highlights before we started our first conversation as well. And what the thing that struck me there was, and I looked it up, and Vikingur is a relatively young club, I believe.
Yeah.
Founded in 2008.
Yeah.
I thought that the turnout of the crowd seemed rather small. Do you expect a big turnout for this match?
Yeah, I'll tell you, Faroese football we've had very different times in the Faroe Islands. We've had times when that was the turnout for the national team as well. And you're trying to figure out what is it that happens. And you could say that although we're very passionate about football, we are also very passionate about a lot of other things, like working or not spending 5 or 6 hours of a day to watch a game where maybe we don't believe we can get a result. This has changed lately, and especially the national team. Now the national ground called Tórshavn, our national stadium, which has a capacity of around 5,000, is being rebuilt. And they sell out to almost every game at the moment. So the turnout and the hype around football is bigger now than it was back then. And if I remember correctly, did Vikingur lose the first game 6-0 or something like that? And then this is the second 4-0, yeah, exactly, yeah. And this is the second leg that they play in Svengaskar in Tofte. That's why the turnout, because people don't really see, and they're not as how would you say, starstruck anymore, because we get national teams here all the time, so we're used to that. Huh? There's a famous story of Preben Elkjær. I don't know if you remember him. He played in Verona in Italy for some years. He's a former Danish striker. He came here before we had UEFA and FIFA clearance, and he could fill a whole stadium just because a Danish player came here to play in a friendly. So things change all the time for us. The turnout for the game against Beşiktaş will be bigger, definitely. There are a lot of people at home now because it's summer vacation. The game is being played on Beşiktaş's normal ground. There are 3 pitches in Tórshavn in the area, and one of them is the national stadium, which is being rebuilt. And then there is the Gundadalur, which both Habe and Beşiktaş, which are 2 of the capital teams, where they play their main games. And if you have 1,000 people in Svengaskar, the game you watched against the Beşiktaş, the turnout doesn't seem very good. And there were more people than you could see on the television because they're sitting behind the camera.
Yeah, I was going mainly on the sound, really.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and the sound just goes straight up in the air. When you're playing Gundadalur, it's exactly. But Gundadalur is more of intimate stadium. The sound doesn't go away. If you shout, it comes back and echoes and things like that. So if there are over 1,000 fans or spectators for that game, you will hear it a lot more clearly and loudly, and it will create a much better experience.
Okay, there's a couple of fun things I want to talk about towards the end of the interview. But first, I want to talk a little bit more about these qualifiers that already were played by B36. You guys came back from going 1-0 down after just 4 minutes in Titograd, and you ended up winning the match. Were you at the game, or were you covering the game for radio?
No, yeah, we sometimes we have covered the away games, but especially when it becomes second round, the traveling is so important. So at this time we weren't covering the away games; we've only been covering the home games, because traveling is reasonably difficult when you go to Montenegro in the middle of the summer. So we didn't cover the away games as a radio, but only the home games. But I'll say yeah.
Excuse me. I did manage to see the goals. They were recorded, I believe, on Facebook, so there were definitely traveling fans, which I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah, usually parents or something like that. There were, I can tell you, but B36 had 6 fans in for the game against Titograd. And
that's not bad.
No, that's not bad. One of them was the parents of a defender called Bjarne Pedersen. And the other 2 more were parents of twins called Hoen and Jutle Samuelsen, and then some friends of them or something like that. So, but that usually happens, you know. People here are reasonably well off, some people, so traveling and following their sons and or their team is happens sometimes. When traveling is okay, they will do that.
So going into that match, what was the feeling? You know, you drew 0-0 at home, so that's not the best position. You go down after 4 minutes. What's the feeling? Do you think, this is going to be the end of the road, or did you guys feel like, okay, they're going to be able to turn this around? And what was the feeling heading into the match? Was there a feeling of, yes, we can beat these guys, we can go on to that match against Beşiktaş, or was it more of a, well, we'll see what happens and we'll take it as it comes?
I would say a huge credit to their coach. Jakob Aborg, the coach, he's proactive. He's an attacking coach. He only stopped playing 2 years ago. He's one of the big legends of the game here. He is at the moment the player who has scored most goals in our best division ever, but he will be overtaking very soon. And he plays now. I know he's a Manchester United fan, but his style resembles what Jürgen Klopp does, for instance, at Liverpool with pressing. He wants to go forward. He wants, yeah, you could call it that. I would call it an adventure style. But that's what it is. Yeah, I know the words. I don't think they go with that much pressure, but sometimes they really do. And he's an exciting coach, and he's, you know, sometimes we have criticized coaches around here because they all become the same. They all get the same education from the Danish training or Danish Football Association, and everybody sort of like is molded into the same person because of educations. And he
more pragmatic than.
Yes, and yeah, and he a bit breaks away from that, and he's a colorful guy. He's one of the best interviewers you can get, and he gives that off to the players. And I don't know if you've seen this video of him doing this sort of like a dance after the game. That's kind of his style, and he deserves credit for taking a young. If you look at the team that played the first game, I can't remember the second team in my head, but it was almost the same team. But when they played the first game against Titograd, their goalkeeper is 19. Their right central defender is 19. Their right back is 18. Their central midfielder, defensive midfielder, is 18, and their left winger is 19. And it takes courage to play with those kind of players. Yes, he's pushed to it because the national right back is injured. He plays for B36, and one of the midfielders, I would call him the Faroese Pirlo. A fantastic midfielder that they have, who has played almost 300 games without missing any game, has now developed an injury, which means he won't be playing for this year.
Name names.
Oh yeah, Roaldur Jakobsen. He's the player. He scored a goal against Hungary, which I think defines him very well. If you look at the national team, you can find it on YouTube. He scores it in Budapest. It's a very good goal. And Jonas Tornes, he's played professionally in Iceland and in Denmark. They're both injured. They won't be playing. And a youth product from Manchester City at the time called Christian Morsen. He's been injured now for some time. So he's missing some very good players, and yet they do very well. And he's very... he dares giving them a chance, and one of the players, for instance, their central midfielder called Magnus Holm Jakobsen has been linked to, for instance, Portuguese football. He played in the Faroe Islands had the under 27 team managed to get to the Euros in Croatia in last April. which is never done before. It's historical for any youth team of the Faroe Islands. And yes, we did lose reasonably big against France, but they also had players who today play for Lyon and Paris Saint-Germain.
Yeah,
so it's a crazy difference. And okay, I'll let you in on another very weird story. While I'm sitting here, I'm looking out in the street in Tórshavn, and the guy that I talked to you about, Jonas Tornes, he's walking by here. And this is how the Faroe Islands is. You end up seeing people.
Open the window and call him in.
Yeah, almost. He's with his family. I think I'll leave him. He's a bit shy when it comes to media, maybe. No, but this is how it works around here. It's so weird. But with players like that, we're trying to develop very good players and things like that. But what I was going to say about Jakob Borg is that when they went to Titograd, to Montenegro, they played 0-0 here. The first thing they told me, even though in second half they were pushed back because our energy isn't as high as when with professional football players, because many of these players go to work every day, so they don't get the rest between training, and they're unable to have 2 training passes in a day. But once you when they came back for the interview, straight away they said 0-0 is a good result because they believe they can score. And if they believe they can score, then Titograd had to score 2. So even though they were going to a lot of heat down in Montenegro and against a team that was champions only a year and a half ago, they believed that they were going to score, and they did. And what Jakob Borg told me before the game was, 1 goal doesn't change anything. Yes, a little bit, but it doesn't change the fact that the B36 are going to have to score at some point. So if Titograd score 1, the section still only need that 1 goal. So when Titograd scored after 4 minutes, he said this in an interview before, we have to stick to our game plan. We cannot go chasing a goal and scoring after the next 5 minutes. We just need a goal before the last whistle. And then we're through. And in second half the goal comes. And then again with a 2-1 victory at the end. So they deserve credit, the young players. They have some very good players. Lukas Sislevic is a player to watch out for, number 11. He's probably the star man. And they seem to deliver on that day in Montenegro, which was very important for B36 because they get through. More UEFA money for them, a great experience against Beşiktaş. Hopefully they'll get through. I don't think so. And also it's very important for us to keep scoring European points because we're on the verge of losing that 4th UEFA spot, because once you lose for every point you gather in UEFA you get this efficiency points. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and now we're
a bad year or something.
We've had 2 or 3 really bad years now, and the best year, you count for 5 years.
Yeah.
And the best year that we have is we're losing those points. So it's very important that we get a lot of points right now.
Yeah.
And the last time Beşiktaş were here, I asked Bernd Schuster, who was the coach at the time, if he couldn't go a little bit easy because they were leading from the first game anyway. And he actually laughed at it, and he said maybe, and then he kept Quaresma on the pitch for 90 minutes, which made no sense to me.
Schuster he was a little bit.
He broke our little promise.
Well, he was a very offensive coach as well. That ultimately I think that kind of ended to his downfall because he was playing with such a high defensive line. I remember, and he just didn't have the players to pull that off, and it just cost. That was some side it looked like suicide on the pitch, almost kamikaze football at times. But entertaining football, without a doubt.
B36 playing entertaining football, but you won't be seeing that against Beşiktaş, except for in glimpse, because it would be suicidal football to play with a high line with high pressure against Beşiktaş. You will see B36 sometimes be all the way just around their own penalty area, but they do have players who are exciting, who want to. The question is only, I would say this way, it's only a question whether Beşiktaş will allow them to do anything, because if Beşiktaş play to their full potential, it's going to be difficult. But if there are glimpses, if there are glitches in the defense, and as this is the first game, maybe some players are not, fully physical condition that they need to be in, then you might actually see some very nice football.
I hope so. I hope to see an entertaining match. And you know what? I have to say, you are an amazing salesman, and you've pushed me to the brink of switching my allegiances almost. Seriously.
Yeah.
No, you do a fantastic job in describing this, and I just get the image of a very of youthly enthusiasm in the team. And you already mentioned a couple of those players that are missing, of course, important players, and you already mentioned one of the star players. But could you just elaborate a little bit more, maybe, on who you think, if B36 are going to push Beşiktaş to their limits, who do you think are the players that are most likely to do so?
Well, first of all, whoever of the goalkeepers plays, I can tell you the story afterwards, but one of the goalkeepers is actually a policeman, and the other one is 19 years old, but the goalkeeper is going to have to play well. That's the first part. That's what we always, also on the national team. Every Faroese team needs a goalkeeper that makes that save that he's not supposed to do at some point in the game. Yeah. But other than that, you need to watch out for the captain. Otmar Ferre, he's an international player, looks like a Viking. He used to have really big red beard like Alexi Lalas from the United States and things like that. But he's really strong and he's really fast. I just don't know if he's fast enough to play Beşiktaş. You're going to watch out for number 11, Lukas Sislevic. He is a 3 or maybe even 4-time player of the year in the Faroe Islands. He's really good. He's very strong on the ball. He's tactically very good, and he's technically very strong, and he can score, and has scored, although it has been penalties. Maynard Olsen, the one that I've also mentioned, he's about to become a full international, I think, within a year or two. But he has that energy and power and dribble and youthfulness about his play. He's the kind of player, if you described me as a salesman, if someone somewhere in Turkey is looking for a player with a bit of excitement on the wing and is not afraid to take a gamble, he's a player to watch. He can do very good things. And they have a new player called Michał Przybylski. He is like Lukas, he's from Poland originally, but they have both lived in the Faroe Islands for a very long time. But none of them have had passports, so they only have so they don't have Faroese passports, which doesn't make them eligible to play national team. But Lucas would have played 50 games for the national team if we had been able to make sure that he could get his passport, which is a totally different discussion, but it takes a long time. And this Michał Przybylski is a very exciting player. He was the youth player of the year last season. And then he switched to Polish football for half a year with a team called, is it Wisla? I don't remember. No, it's it's a very big club. It used to be a very big club, and now they're relegated to the 4th division. And they're a really big club in Poland. I really should remember the name, Wisla Lodz or something like that. But he's come back. And then the striker for B36 is Kai Marshak. He has almost 50 national games for Estonia. And we were really skeptical when he signed for B36 because we were thinking, why would you come to B36 when you have 50 games for Estonia? But he's turned out to have a really good quality. People were thinking there must be something wrong with him. He must be injured or something. But he's playing very regularly. He's the second top goal scorer and really good at keeping the ball. You can play the ball to him and he'll keep the ball. I just don't know if he will be able to do that against Beşiktaş. That's the question that comes in all the time. And then one more: keep an eye on the young defensive midfielder. I assume he will play because they have one suspension of a hard man in the midfield called Eli Falkvard Nilsen. He has accumulated 3 yellow cards, so he's out. And then this young guy, he's 18, and he can put passes. For 40, 50-yard passes, and they'll be inch perfect most of the time. So he's an exciting player.
Sounds like a very exciting team, as you described it as well, with the coach, of course, and the football they want to play. Now, you already kind of alluded to it, that one of the players is a policeman, and this is one of the things that in Turkey it's actually a big thing when a Turkish team plays a club like this. They like to shine a light on what the professions of the players are. Are there any fun stories you can tell us? Yeah, well, the absolute one of the famous stories that's around here, I don't remember everything about it, but the story is, and I know this guy very well, is that when B36 played Fenerbahce in 2006,
they came here, and someone from Fenerbahce, I don't know if I remember if it was the chairman or someone like that, the coach or someone, they were talking to one of the police officers who was on a motorcycle that was going to escort the bus to Tórshavn after they had landed at the airport. And they asked him if he wanted to watch the game. And he took his helmet off and he said, yeah, but I'll be playing in the game. Because he was one of the players for B36 who in his life is or normal work life is a police officer. So he escorted the Fenerbahce players to Tórshavn, and then he went to train with B36, and the day after they were playing against each other.
That's absolutely amazing. So that's the goalkeeper, right?
No, that's no. This one is a central defender. He stopped playing many years ago, but the goalkeeper, yeah. But the goalkeeper now, he's also a policeman, and some of the guys go to school, and then some of them will be working. Jakob Borg has his own car company here, which does repairs and rental service and things like that, and he has a couple of players working for him, and so on. So it's very normal for players to work. There's a juice bar at the end of the national stadium, and one of the players or two even may have worked there. So it's the kind of stuff that happens here. But that's the fun part. The difficult part is that they're unable to rest between trainings and so on. So when a player really needs to go, he needs to leave the Faroe Islands for bigger teams.
And one of the other questions I wanted to ask you, what's the furthest a team from the Faroe Islands has ever gotten in Europe?
The furthest? Wuchingur once did... Wuchingur, yeah, you said we talked about Wuchingur earlier because they played Beşiktaş in 2010. At that time they were... At that time, they are from 2008, but it's a coalition of two clubs. And one of the clubs is reasonably historical. They're four-time champions in the 90s and so on. So you could say that...
so they didn't start from scratch.
No, exactly, yeah. But it took them until 2 years ago to win their first championship. And they have a very charismatic player in central defense. He's the national captain of the Faroe Islands as well. So for him, that was the first championships for him. So he was very happy when they won. Wuchingur once went to the third round. I'm just trying to see if I can find the exact there, because they played against Inter Turku from Finland. Yeah. And there's a bit special about that game is that the game after the game, the referee was suspended for being bribed to give penalties to both teams. The only problem was that the Inter Turku player missed his penalty.
He probably got bribed by some Chinese betting company to ramp up the amount of goals in the match.
Exactly, it was something like that. But the thing is that you don't want to take anything away from Wuchingur because I would say they were worthy winners as well, because they proved both before and after that they can actually get reasonably good results. So they managed to go 3 rounds, and then they beat Tromsø from Norway. Was that maybe in 2000? Yeah, from 2014 actually. Yeah, and then they end up playing Rijeka. Actually, if I'm telling the truth here, I actually think that the Inter Turku game was the year before, and then they play a team from Litava, and then they play Tromsø, which were actually relegated the year after. I think they might have qualified through the cup. And then they beat Tromsø, and then they end up playing Rijeka from Croatia. And I'm being told by the players from Wuchingur that playing them was ridiculous because of the quality. Yeah? So you can imagine that Beşiktaş is also ridiculously good quality to play against for a Faroese team.
Well, yeah, I think Rijeka, Başakşehir played them, I want to say last year, I believe, 2 years ago, I think, in the Europa League qualifiers, I believe it was. And that's like one of the up-and-coming clubs in Turkey right now.
Yeah.
And they beat them, but it took them they did take them to the limit, I believe, if I recall correctly. I did watch those games, but...
So I was told at the time that Rijeka was a really good club. They were doing really well.
Good young players. Like in Croatia, they have a very good youth development, as we can see as a result of the Croatia's national team, of course.
Yeah, exactly.
Who also have a relatively small population with only 4 million inhabitants,
Yeah.
a little bit over that, and for them to achieve what they did. I'm sure that Iceland must inspire the clubs and the national team on the Faroe Islands as well, that they are capable of maybe down the road partake in a tournament and stuff like that, and for the clubs maybe to get to the group stages of the Europa League at some point. That must be the goal, surely.
Yeah, I mean, for us, this might be a little bit of a political issue, so on. But sometimes sometimes around here in the Faroe Islands, we say maybe we should look at, because we're in the Danish kingdom, and a lot of things that we do partially from the Danish Football Association, and we cite also a lot with them, and it's fine, and we all support Denmark when they play and so on. But when you have to look at the identity of how we play and what we do, we have to look more to Iceland, and that's what we're trying to do. And if I'd say that if there's one difference between Iceland and the Faroe Islands, is that at least up until some years ago, the players of Iceland were willing to leave their country when they were 15. And they would go to clubs wherever in Scandinavia or wherever they would go, to England or whatever, and then they would play. Some of them would come back home and then go away again. But here in the Faroe Islands, it's a bit more safe. It's a bit too comfortable maybe at times.
Comfortable cocoon maybe.
Yeah, a little bit too much, huh? But now suddenly we're having players going abroad, and if I say we have had times when we've had very good players. We once had the top goal scorer in FC Copenhagen, Tode Jonsson, who was a player who had qualities to go further. But at times, if you played in the second best division in Denmark, it was actually really good news. People were talking about it. But now you really have to start in the Superliga, which is the best division in Denmark, or in Tippeligaen, and the best one in Norway, before you really make a difference, or people really start talking to you like you're a star. So we're changing slowly into that, and we're getting more and more players who go early. I think we have 3 players in the FC Midtjylland academy, which is a famous one, and they're doing really well. I think they were champions.
With a very particular scouting system, I believe. I believe they use a sort of computer program.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't they?
Yeah,
and they had Vaart was there as well.
He was there as well, yeah, and I don't think he had such a good time there. Maybe
his career was over already.
Yeah, it was, and then maybe you think that the name would carry him, but maybe that doesn't always work out in the top of Danish football, because I mean FC Copenhagen, they've also managed to get out of the group stages sometimes, and now Brøndby are showing off and getting back to their good old strength. So to have 3 players in the youth system of Midtjylland it's a step forward, and we have this season we've had 2 players who are even younger than that. We're talking 12, 13, which go with their parents who say, okay, let's have a look at what's going on here. So the parents go with them and then try and mold them into players, and then you see where it goes. So the more players we can get to do that, the better we will get, because that's also what Iceland did, and they've done it, I mean, absolutely fantastic. And Iceland is a huge inspiration. Here where I'm sitting in the middle of Tórshavn, just in front of the harbour, there's they call it the stairs, but it's sort of like a place where you can sit. And it's in the center of the town, and we would have big screens for the World Cup and for the Euros. And when Iceland played, there would be hundreds and hundreds of people sitting here cheering Iceland on. So we do, as an identity.
So there is a rivalry, but you do support them when.
No, I don't think there's a rivalry. There's only admiration. Okay. I would call them brother nation, and I think it goes both ways.
It's really a shame that none of our fans are allowed to travel, because we had an incident occur 2 years ago against Lyon. And basically UEFA suspended both Lyon and Beşiktaş for their fans, and if there was any more issues, they would get like a 1-year suspension in Europe. So the club president Fikret Orman decided last year not to allow any traveling supporters, and again this year because it's the second probational year. It was a 2-year probation, basically. So there won't be any traveling fans. So otherwise, I would have asked you, do you have any tips for people who might be going to Tórshavn, where they could get something good to eat or something? But unfortunately, that won't be applying now.
I was told that there were some fans, but I don't know if how that works. They might be traveling from Denmark. They have a bit of Turkish population in Denmark as well, which is only a 2-hour flight away. But it might be difficult getting here on flights during the summer because there's so much traffic. There's a ferry as well. Takes 2 days to get here. But if you were to, But if you were to get here, you would definitely get something good to eat. And if you get good weather, you get the best parts of. I mean, it's like heaven when the weather is good. But when you're here in the winter, you understand why there's only sheep living here, other than us.
That's funny because I actually saw a program, a foodie program, I guess you could call it, about Iceland, where they were cooking a sheep's head.
It's good. Tastes well.
Oh, okay. Is that something you guys eat as well?
Yeah, it's sheep's good. Head? Yeah.
Okay.
It might be a bit difficult when you eat it the first time, but when you're grown up in that culture, it's just normal. So you have to eat what you get.
I already don't like sheep meat to begin with, let alone.
You'll be in trouble here. No, you can get This is a very modern society. You'd get all the normal restaurants and so on. You can go get sushi, you can get burgers, you can get steaks, you can get everything you want around here. So that would not be a problem. But if you want to go very Faroese, you'd have to have some sheep heads.
So we talked about the home game, of course, but obviously next week the players will be traveling to Istanbul and they will be playing at Vodafone Park, our new stadium. Beşiktaş have only ever lost once in European competition. That was in their new stadium. That was last season against Bayern Munich. They have an incredibly strong home reputation. They've lost in total in over 40 games, I believe. They lost twice, once in the cup, in the Turkish Cup. They're still unbeaten in the Turkish league in 2 seasons, 2.5 seasons, I should say. And or am I missing it out? 1.5, whatever. So basically, they have a very good home record. Is there, have you spoken to any of the players, to the coaching staff, anyone like that? Are they excited for that, for traveling to Istanbul, to playing in front of Beşiktaş's fans are famous throughout the world, really. Of course, Galatasaray and Fenerbahçe fans as well, but Beşiktaş are known for having the best fans in Turkey and among the best fans in the world. Is that something that is being talked about as well, or is that not on the agenda yet? Are they still focusing mainly on the first leg, and then we'll look towards the second leg afterwards?
No, they're already talking about the second leg because they have chartered a plane. I don't know how many fans will be going and how it works, or whether all the agreements have been made and so on. But that was the last thing I heard. So there might be some fans from B36 going to the game and so on. What I do remember is from 2006 and from 2010, when you talk to players, that's the game they talk about. 2006 about the Fenerbahçe game for B36, and then in 2010 for Wuchinggur, where one of the players was afraid to fly, and he decided to take the ferry to Denmark and then drive all the way down to Turkey just to be able to play that match because it was so special. The thing that I think bothers them a bit is that with the conditions that we have with football and it not being fully professional, you're unable to create a very competitive game. So sometimes you might feel you're standing there and they're looking up to the fans and to the cameras and everything and saying, in their heart they really want to give a good performance and give the crowd something to be excited about, but physically it's just impossible when you don't train as a full-time professional. But they all love it. Half of our national team, they get this experience regularly, but they play abroad. So for players here, B36 have between 2 or 3 national players. So for the rest of them, this might be their absolute best experience from an atmosphere and so on. And that's not saying that there are better atmospheres than one at Beşiktaş, but when you played with the national team, you might have had some reasonably good experiences sometimes. But for many of these players, that's going to be the highlight. That's the thing they're going to talk about. That's the picture they're going to put up on Instagram in 5 years' time, or whatever social media we used back then. Or in 5 years' time, but that's the picture they're gonna remember, and the pictures of B36 playing Fenerbahce, you know, that picture still circles around now and again when people talk about like what was the atmosphere like. That was a crazy game to play, and crazy meaning good with the atmosphere and everything. And so yeah, these players are they're not gonna think about it as a football game until next, but they all know in their heads that they're going to play Beşiktaş, and I'm sure every one of them, especially those young players, they've been on YouTube looking at some of the videos of the Beşiktaş home fans making that atmosphere. And what I like now is that I do honestly believe that some of the players are sitting there thinking, I want to do something special in that game. I want to do well, and not I'm afraid, but respectful. Yeah. But and I can add to that Jakob Borg as a player. Is he 36 or 37 now? But he played in first team football from 97, maybe 96. He never managed to play and get on to the next round as a player. He played for B36 and half of the two teams here in Tórshavn. And the one thing he said, and he said this in a very big interview we made with him, because he was actually once a trialist at Liverpool, but they changed manager at that time because Houllier came in and took over from Roy Evans. So the deal of taking him in for a year and two didn't happen. And in that interview, he also said that the one thing he regrets as a footballer is that he had too much respect for the other teams and players, that he actually didn't manage to express himself as a player when he was playing those games. He has drilled that into his players. Go and express yourself. Try and do something. Don't be afraid. And that doesn't mean that you don't respect Beşiktaş, but it means that if they're going to play to their maximum and maybe even more, they have to have that drive, you know, they have to have that thing in their heart that says, and in their mind that says that I want to do well, because that is also a way to respect Beşiktaş, you know, just to stay back in your own penalty box and then kick the ball away and go down and be injured all the time, you know, it might take 2 goals off, but it does. I would know about that. I don't want to side between those two.
Yeah, they used to have a period where they had like Christoph Daum as their coach, and they were really like laying down every 5 seconds. And actually, the last couple of years they had with Aykut Kocaman and with Dik Advocaat, they were very similar to that as well. Very negative football. But yeah, that's not the discussion we're having, of course.
No, exactly. But B36, they aren't about that, but they might be pressured, because once you play down there, once 25 minutes have gone, you know, the air is going to go out of the lungs of some of the players. When you get the chance to just get a minute break, that's what they do. But I'll tell you one thing, they don't do that because they want to, they do that because they have to. They're physically tired at that time, because when they play here, I have commented on a lot of games this season, when the ball goes out, the first thing the player who's closest to the ball tries to do is to look at the ball boy or ball girl and then say, give me the ball, and then they'll throw the ball in play straight away and then see if they can move the game and try and surprise the other team before they get their organization. So that's the kind of play that they do. So they're a really exciting team in that sense. But against Beşiktaş, you know, everything changes because the difference is so big.
But of course, I mean, given Beşiktaş's performance the last 2 years in Europe, in the Champions League and in the Europa League as well, I think that must be a great motivation for these players. You know, if you show yourself against this team, you're kind of playing against a team that did really well in Europe over the last couple of years. And that also says something. Maybe it can, you know, if one of those young kids can show themselves in this match, that might earn them a transfer to Turkey. You never know. Not to Beşiktaş, but to one of the smaller clubs in Turkey, and you know they pay really well too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, if they pay. Yeah, I've heard some stories about that, but I won't be challenging any of those things. But or even just other clubs that are around that have scouts that look and can look at these instats or whatever it's called, and then you can see, okay, well, this player actually did okay against Beşiktaş. But the one thing that's a bit dangerous when you say that is that also there is a chance that this game, like the one in 2010, that it's 4-0 at half time. But it's so important then that you're able to pick yourself up and say that because you play well or because you don't play well in a game against Beşiktaş, it's not always up to you as a player from Beşiktaş. It's also if, say, Ryan Babel, I saw him play some good games for Liverpool. If he hits absolutely top level of everything, every time he shoots, the ball bounces off the crossbar and in and so on, the goalkeeper just got to pick himself up and say, okay, look, sometimes these things happen, but it's exciting and they really want to do it, absolutely. But you have to be careful as a B36 player and as a player from the Faroe Islands, also with the national team, not to let yourself be only judged by that one game. So it can be a bit difficult with that if you think, okay, God, I'm going to sell myself on this game, and then you do badly, and then you don't think you can be sold ever. It's kind of like you try and make it a little bit calm so you reach the perfect level of excitement when the game starts.
Well, Tróndur, I have to say I really enjoyed this conversation with you. I think we touched on most everything we could talk about regarding this match, regarding the team. It's very fascinating. I personally, I'm a big fan of the Europa League. I think it's because in Turkey, everyone wants, all the big teams, they always want to play Champions League. Of course they do, because the money is so much bigger. And it is important for the club's financial stability and all that stuff. However, I personally, I love the Europa League because you do get to travel to more, I hope this is not going to be offensive, but more obscure locations.
Yeah, no, absolutely, yeah.
And I think that epitomizes what the Europa League should stand for. I personally really enjoy the competition, and I'm really looking forward to both of these games. I think sometimes with bigger clubs, when they draw a relatively small team, the players can get a little bit complacent and it's like, oh, we have to go over there. But I personally am of the opinion that's fantastic experience in its own. You don't get to travel every day to the Faroe Islands, You get to go to England, you get to go to Spain for European matches all the time. But going to the Faroe Islands isn't for you say this is a once-in-a-lifetime thing for many of these players probably, but it's probably going to be for some of the Beşiktaş players as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I'll tell you one opinion that I have that's so important when you come from a country like the Faroe Islands is that there were times when, for instance, Joachim Löw, when he was here with Germany for some years ago, he said he had been quoted before saying that these games don't matter and maybe there should be a preliminary round for countries for the UEFA, for the Euro and the World Cup, where I'm thinking, no, you're playing 2, maybe 4 games for every 2 years against smaller nations. But that's the cost of playing football, and football being the most worldwide sport maybe, yeah? And then you have to have all the small countries with you. You have to have all the small areas with you. You have to, you cannot just pick on countries because they're small. And that's the same thing with the Europa League. I think it's so important that, as you say, that you go everywhere, that you try and invite everyone to say, here's something different. So if you want to be professional-ish, as the Faroe Islands is now, because now the UEFA money is coming into Faroese football, which means that players can get a little bit better pay. Maybe they can work half days sometimes, so they can rest and train twice, and you can change. And then you'll also find something funny. And think if Beşiktaş are staying at the hotel Faroe Islands, they'll have sheep walking around on the roof, and I'm not sure that happens many places. But that's what we have a lot of here in the Faroe Islands. You actually have grass on your roof. And we've seen players. There's one famous from when France was here, when Frank Ribéry had a picture out his window, and there was a sheep literally standing outside his hotel window eating grass, and he's like, "What is going on here?" Huh? And that's what you get when you come here, because everything can be McDonald's and Burger King and Nike and Adidas, but sometimes life is a bit different. And I'll tell you one weird thing. If Quaresma came walking down in Tórshavn here, I'm not so sure a lot of people would have bothered him. people are just down to earth. It's just easy. Cristiano Ronaldo was a different story, but
Yeah, that's
but as soon as you go one level down, it's just an easygoing place and with a different culture and different way of life.
So I was just about to ask Tróndur how the internet was in the Faroe Islands, because I'm almost starting to consider moving there since he's such a great salesman. And just as I was asking that question, the connection broke. So welcome back, Tróndur. and we've covered most of it now, and I just want to thank you once again for coming on to the Black Eagles podcast and giving us all this information and some really, really fun stories that you told us, and some history about the Faroe football, because this is a new podcast. We started only recently, but we had the World Cup preview in which we spoke to some Portuguese experts, to some Croatian experts, because Beşiktaş had 3 players at the World Cup. Since Turkey wasn't there, we only had our Portuguese and our Croatian player. So we spoke a lot about Croatian football, about Portuguese football, and the intention behind our podcast is not just to talk about Beşiktaş, but also to take the opportunity when we play teams in Europe and we speak to experts on the ground there from those respective countries, just to have a nice conversation about the local football, especially in countries where everyone knows the Premier League. You mentioned it before as well, everyone in the Faroe Islands, and I spoke recently to Jan Hagen, who's a Portuguese football expert, but he actually lives in Norway, and he spoke about how it's exactly the same there. Everyone watches the Premier League, and that's like a religion almost. So everyone really knows the Premier League. Everyone knows La Liga, and even to a lesser extent the Bundesliga and stuff like that. But this is also one of the things what I like about Europa League. You meet teams from other countries too, and you have this opportunity to talk about a country that you probably maybe otherwise wouldn't talk about. And there's so many fascinating stories, and just get a glimpse of the culture through the expert we talked to. And I think you did an amazing job today with relaying that to our listeners. And once again, thank you for coming on. And I just want to ask you, is there anything, because you mentioned Twitter, I believe, I don't remember if it was off air or on air, but you did mention Twitter, that it's not such a huge thing over in the Faroe Islands, but you do have a Twitter account. Is there anything you would like to plug, such as your Twitter account, your work for the radio, or any of the articles you write, stuff like that? Please take this opportunity and go ahead and plug your stuff, so to speak.
I'll start off by saying, when you said that about the internet, that there's a running joke here in the Faroe Islands that if you go to Denmark and tell them that we don't have internet, don't have roads, and live in caves, they'll actually believe you. It's a joke because we don't think that they always have the greatest interest in us, but things are changing, of course. And second of all, you asked me, that it was off air, but you also asked me if I had WhatsApp, and I've been hammered by this for like 5 years from people I know around the world. But here in the Faroe Islands, we do certain things, and we do them really big. One of them is Premier League, and the other one is Facebook. It's people here use Facebook, and that's it. We don't need anything more. But we use Twitter mostly as following news from around the world. For me personally, it's been a lot about I studied in Liverpool. I'm a big Liverpool fan, and I studied in Liverpool from 2009 and 2012. So I was there when, for instance, Ryan Babel was playing for Liverpool. So that's when I started off by using Twitter. Sometimes I'll leave some messages in English on Twitter, especially when you feel that there's some interest about knowing some of the stuff. So I do that. But other than that, I don't think a lot of people from around the world would be able to. They wouldn't be able to understand. But I can promise you one thing: that if you go, if the Saxons, B36, if they score in the game, and especially if the goal matters in the game, you can go onto our webpage, which is in.fo, and somewhere around there you're going to see a picture of a guy with a microphone or happy B36 players, and then you're going to be able to play an audio of the goal. Yeah. We always leave the goal from the radio. We always put the goals out for everyone to hear. It's actually quite a popular feature that we have, and also with all the interviews and everything. And then Yeah, I don't know if you remember the Iceland, the commentator from Iceland, but we are similarly happy.
Do you lose your voice the same way?
Yeah, we all do. When we are happy here in the Faroe Islands, we are really happy, and when the Faroe Islands score, or where we get big results, or even get some big goals, and some of the most famous goals that we have here is beating Greece in 2014. And we actually go into a 2-goal lead, which is at Tórshavn here in Gundadalur, and on a hot June day in 2015, and everything just goes absolutely berserk. So I do lose my voice sometimes, but it's excitement, and I'm very lucky to be able to be so close to some of the big sports things that happen here in the Faroe Islands. I was in Algeria as well last summer because we have a handball team that's doing reasonably well as well, under 21. They managed to get to the World Cup. So when you have a 50,000 population and you have an under 17 team that goes to the Euros in football, you have an under 21 team that goes to the World Cup in handball, and you get to play Beşiktaş and Portugal and other clubs. As a working journalist and commentator, you just have to count yourself very lucky.
Well, actually, I was going to ask you whether you were planning on going to Istanbul for the return. I don't know if you have already decided whether you're going or not, but if you're still on the fence, I would very much recommend you do go. And if you do go, please let me know, and I will arrange one of my friends to maybe guide you around or something, if that's something you'd like to do.
Absolutely. We don't know yet, because it collides with our national holiday. Which is really big around here, and the players will be leaving B36. I can add one thing about the Faroese teams in Europe now is that the prize money is growing, and because the prize money has grown so much now, the clubs are able to leave 2 days early maybe. So when Beşiktaş was the place and a lot of heat in Montenegro, they were able to go down to Montenegro early, so they managed to deal with the heat and deal with everything and so on. So they'll be leaving early, but as soon as I know, I'll absolutely let you know as well if I'm going to the game, because it's going to be, they call it hell. I hope it's not as bad as the hell that I'm being taught about from a young age.
I think that hell is more something that the Galatasaray fans like to use for their stadium, but our, it gets described by foreign fans. It sometimes gets described like that. It's just our stadium is a brand new stadium. The only smart stadium in Turkey, by the way. So if you want to use your iPhone, you can just use it in there. Brand new, built, sponsored by Vodafone, of course. Hence the name. But if you have the opportunity to go, I very much recommend you do. I think you're going to have an amazing experience there, regardless of the result. And I think you'll find that the Turkish people are very hospitable. I hope they won't be too provocative on match day, but it's definitely something I would recommend you do. And if you do, please let me know, and I'll try and sort something out so you can have some people maybe to meet there, maybe talk to. One more thing. Yes,
I was going to say, you said about the fans and being provocative and things like that. We see that sometimes on TV, but I have never experienced a Faroese team, neither national or club team, that has ended up in trouble, because sometimes if you want trouble, you have to seek it, and we don't. Yes. We're just here and we're happy, and we're easy to meet, easy people to talk to, and things like that. And the only experience that we've had with Beşiktaş and with Fenerbahçe have been positives, and everything has been in a very good spirit. So I hope that's going to be the truth here, because you have 2 clubs who are playing in black and white, so should be a good match, shouldn't it?
For sure. Once again, Tróndur, thank you very much. People, give him a look, give him a follow on Twitter. What is your Twitter account exactly? The handle?
Oh, let me see right here. It's my name backwards, isn't it?
It's
Arge Tróndur.
Yeah. So give him a follow, people. Give him some love. Maybe also, are you planning on interviewing any of the players? Maybe when Beşiktaş are visiting, or don't you know yet?
We always try to do so, and if it's possible, sometimes some of the clubs are, and it depends a little bit also on the mood of the players and so on, because they don't feel obliged to talk to us, because like if some of the biggest medias in the world ask them to come, they'd see the benefit of it, but talking to a small nation radio.
Well, I hope you can land an interview with Ryan Babel, perhaps. I think that would be enjoyable.
I hope so. Things like that. Oh, he is. Yeah, I know. And yeah, things like that, and then we try to find stories about players who might have played against the Faroe Islands or Faroese teams, who might have been teammates with someone and something like that. That's usually a good way in. So if you can find some personal way, we always try to get those interviews mostly. So we're definitely gonna try.
Okay, well, ending on that note, everyone, thank you very much for listening to this episode of the Black Eagles podcast, a preview for both games, really, against B36 Tórshavn. My name is Kaan and I was joined today by Tróndur Arge. Very much, again, thank you very much again, stumbling over my words there a little bit, for joining me. Fantastic interview. I hope everyone listened to it and enjoyed it. And please let us know if you have any feedback or anything like that, any questions about B36. You can direct them at Tróndur, or just tag me or something, and I'll point you towards the right guy. So once again, I've thanked you, I think, a million times by now, but this time I'm ending it. Thanks for joining me, and I hope maybe to have you on again in the future, perhaps, if Beşiktaş meet a team from the Faroe Islands again in the future. Thank you for joining me.
Yeah, no problem, and you're always welcome to contact me.
Well, Black Eagles podcast listeners, once again, we've made it through another episode. Thank you once again to Tróndur Arge. Fantastic interview, very informative stuff. Now, who else is sitting at the edge of their seats waiting for this match to begin like I am? Because I'll tell you, I have been starved for some real competitive Beşiktaş football, and the day is nearly upon us. Everyone, put on your shirts. If you have the new ones, throw them on. If you don't, throw any of your old ones on. Let's get behind our team. Once again, the match will be July 26th, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here in New York City. You can do the math, make that work to wherever you are. Of course, as always, please follow the podcast on Twitter at Eagles_podcast. Eagles, plural, that is. Of course, you can always follow our flagship for all the news, everything Beşiktaş related, even stuff that doesn't quite make the podcast, and that's going to be at Beşiktaş_INT. Short for international. Of course, you can follow my friend, my co-host, the host with the most, if you will, Kaan on Twitter. He is at Razerian, Razzerian. I love when I get to say Z instead of Z. Kaan, suck it. He'll be back next week to Z it up. I am at Sir_Writes_a lot. Of course, you can follow me. My recently dedicated Twitter feed to Beşiktaş is still somewhat in its infancy, so please give me a follow. Although, I'm not too concerned by any of those superficial things. But sure enough, yes. And, of course, follow our esteemed Faroese guest, Tróndur Arge. You can find him on Twitter at ARGETRONDUR. So his last name and my first name. Please do, let us know what you think of the podcast, what we could be doing better, what we are doing very well. Please, thank you. That would be great to hear, of course. And as always, come back for more. here at the Black Eagles podcast, things are just getting going, and of course, there's going to be so much more to come in the coming days and weeks with the transfer window rounding up, with the regular season starting up as well. So, of course, stay tuned, be good, treat your friends well. You know, any rivals, if you have any friends from the Faroe Islands, be nice. Tomorrow's a big day, but that doesn't mean we have to drop our civility. And of course, as always, go Beşiktaş!